Okay, welcome to Shadows and Ink podcast, where we interview the authors and talk about horror. And today's guest is Angela Yuriko Smith, and I'm going to start by asking her to introduce herself. So take it away.
Hi. Well, first, thank you, Anita, for letting me be on Shadows and Ink. It's super exciting to see this new platform. And my name is Angela Yuriko Smith. I am an author, of course. This is like the worst part. I always forget what I'm supposed to say. Published Space and Time magazine, and I have a couple new books coming out. But I think we're going to cover all that in just a few minutes.
We are indeed. So tell us a little about what you write, genres, that sort of thing, and how you got started.
I pretty much will write anything. I've written for food before for advertisements. Like I got free food if I would write something. I write a lot of horror right now, science fiction, poetry, and a lot of nonfiction. That's actually where my background is like about 20 plus years. I don't know, it like kind of fades in newspapers and nonfiction. So that was fun too. I like nonfiction because it's kind of a way of like, you want to meet somebody? Just offer to do an interview and you guys will meet.
Yeah, you'll find out lots of things when you do interviews.
I want to get backstage. Could I do a story on that? There, you're backstage.
Yeah, we've done previous interviews and we've discussed a few things, I think, over the years.
Yes. Yes, we're going to keep this Shadows and Ink pure and clean.
Yes, we
Probably,
won't go
Joe.
off the rails too much.
Yeah, probably. We'll most likely stay somewhat on the rails.
Okay, so you do have a journalism background. Do you have any interesting stories about your days in journalism?
Probably like the most exciting thing I ever did was purely to get in that spot. I was interviewing a drag racer, and I'm not a car person, so it wasn't NASCAR. I know that, but it was souped up cool cars on a racetrack, and that's about what I know. And taking the photos, did the interview. We got to hang out with the pit crew and everything, which was kind of exciting. And I had my kids with me, so they got to hang out with the pit crew, which I think is why I was even doing the story because one of my sons was super into cars at the time. But the moment that I loved is I said, I'll get a better picture if I can stand like on the starting line between the two cars. And so I can get the picture of them like going. And they let me. Crazy people like probably wouldn't be able to do that now. There'd probably be like all these kind of like insurance things I'd have to sign, but they were fine with it. And the rocks were all hitting me as these cars were peeling off. I did get great shots of the cars. Actually, I didn't realize they actually torque up and the wheels partially left the ground as they were like zipping off. So that was definitely a very cool memory.
Yeah, you have a few stories like that. You're a bit fearless in some of the things you've done.
So,
Way more fearless than I am. Um, and speaking of fearless, one of your more recent projects, award-winning projects, I might add, it has been the trilogy collections by Asian horror writers, Black Cranes, Tortured Willows, and Unquiet Spirits. So tell us how that project started.
oh, absolutely. It's that is like definitely a dear to my heart project. It was actually Lee Murray and Genevieve Flynn that kind of got the ball rolling on all that. And I'm sure you've probably heard the story. They were both at a conference. They didn't know each other, and they were both the early birds. And so they were standing there probably a half an hour before the conference started. Nobody there but these two Asian girls. And so they started joking about, being overachievers and, Asian girls always have to be early. And then they started asking like why is there no Asian, well, there is Asian horror, but why isn't there more Asian horror? Like where's our stories from Asian horror women? And the two of them decided to put together a collection, which was Black Cranes. And at that time I was a story, I contributed two stories for that. And then just the reception, I think there was so much, we didn't really think anybody would care about the book, but the reception was amazing. And gosh, they won like Shirley Jackson and the Bram Stokers, and I can't even remember all the things they got for that. I have none of those prizes because I was not an editor. But then we decided to follow it up with Tortured Willows, and so that was short fiction. And then we decided to go into a completely different genre. And it was, again, we didn't really expect much out of it. We're like, well, since we all had so much fun working together, let's bring Christina Singh into it. And let's bring, well, and it was Genevieve and Lee. Genevieve had never written a poem before. So this is probably one of my highlights of my career is she had never written a poem. And we were talking about it, and Lee was a newer poet at the time. And I'm like, no, no, you can do it. You can do it. You can definitely do a poem. So start maybe with structure, like a pantoum. And so she did write a pantoum, and she has won, I think, multiple prizes, like multiple awards for that pantoum. So a little bit of love and hate there, like, oh, your first poem won all those prizes, Jean. That's great. I've just been, doing this a while. So, but also it was just really inspiring. And the poetry, it came from like a place where we really didn't think anybody was care. So we were really writing from ourselves. And that is kind of what broke open a lot of my research on Okinawa because we're writing from our Asian perspective. And so I thought I was going to start out with, my grandmother's feet are very tiny. Like they're like a size 4, I think, American. And the things, the weird food that I grew up eating, that's what I thought my poetry was going to be about. And as I was digging, in my research, I uncovered a lot of the things that's still happening in Okinawa today. With colonization, did not even realize that Okinawans are indigenous, which was kind of a shock. That was like a weird thing of like, what? I'm part indigenous? That's not my experience. I thought it was Japanese, but yeah, I'm not going to get into all the politics right now. But so that basically that poem like kind of ripped me wide open. I cried a lot as I wrote it. Um, Definitely the most intense thing I've written. And so then when that was well received and that won awards, that was kind of like, wow. So, we didn't want to quit there. So then we did Unquiet Spirits, which was published in February, and that's nonfiction. So we have 3 books. It's an unconventional trilogy because it's 3 books and 3 genres with 3 publishers. So it was Omnium Gatherum was Black Cranes, and then Raw Dog has it now is in its second printing, and then Yuriko Publishing did Tortured Willows, and Black Spot Books has done Unquiet Spirits, which is the 3rd one. And that's 21 Asian women coming together in nonfiction to talk about their experiences with horror and things like that. So it's been, and I guess In Eugenia is kind of the follow up to that. So we're keep finding things to say. I think it's probably proper or very fitting that we've started calling ourselves the Unquiet Sisters because we're definitely being unquiet.
Yes, and I've read Unquiet Spirits, and it's definitely award worthy of for as well as the other two.
Thank you. We're hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Unquiet Spirits. It was one of the best books I read that year. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're hoping, we're crossing our fingers that, 3rd time's the charm
mm.
as we move up to StoryCon soon.
Okay, so we're going to move off of that now and onto the magazine side of your ventures because that's relatively new for you.
Mhm.
So how did you get started with Space and Time magazine, and how are you finding publishing a magazine?
Um, it was completely by accident. I had been self-publishing for a long time, like I'm an indie author like you, and I really enjoy that. But I realized I was making myself kind of an airtight bubble. Like the same people were always my readers, and it was getting stagnant, and I wasn't bringing in new readers. So that's bad for growth. And I decided to start submitting things in magazines. Like I know people do that, and I had come from the nonfiction newspaper side, completely different world. So I was like, well, what are my friends publishing? So I had looked, and Christina Singh had just published something in this magazine called Space and Time. And I was like, oh, I'll go there. And lo and behold, there's this message from Hildy Silverman, who was the editor at the time, who took it over from Gordon Linsner. And Hildy had this really sad message about how, with the rising costs and everything and time and, magazines are not for the weak of heart. And she was going to have to close it. And I was just like, well, dang it, that's, what luck I have to, I'm going to finally submit someplace and they're closing. And then at the end, she has a sentence that said, basically, if there's any publishers out there, anybody who could possibly take this magazine on, we would love it. We want it to stay alive. And I was kind of like, well, I'm not doing that. I mean, I just had closed down a publication that when I was in the newspapers, and then I finally left. I was like, oh, I'm going to have all this free time. You know what? I'm going to start my own publication. So I did that for a year to just get it out of my system. Then you can do all the things that you wanted to do and you don't have a boss telling you what to do. So I did that for a year and I was like, yep, got that out of my system. I'm not doing that again. I apologize for the dog. But anyways, yeah. And then I finally, after much wrestling, said I would do it. Hey, Choopy. That's the chupacabra in the background. But yeah, I actually got the magazine. We agreed on my birthday um, that I would take it over, and then also got a house that day. Like that's when we signed for the house. I was like, got a house and a magazine on my 50th birthday. I don't think I can get anything else. That's it. Like that's pretty much the lifetime. Okay, he's going. Go away. I love you. Goodbye.
Okay, so what have been the challenges of taking over the magazine?
A lot of it is just what to publish because I think when you're a publisher, you wind up, and I'm sure everybody has this problem. There's so much material, and there's only so much money, and there's not a lot of money in publishing. And this is me assuming that there is publishing in money, or public money. Oh, thank you. Sorry, publishing money in publishing. I don't have any interruptions going on right now, Anita. It's okay, but this was just delivered. Thank you.
Okay, yes, and for all those listeners, that was a nice little ice cream sundae she held up.
so, so yeah, sorry, I am back to my train of thought. So yes, that would probably be the hardest. Is just there's so many things to publish, and there's just not the money to publish everything. And it breaks my heart every single time I have to say no to something, and it breaks it twice if it's somebody that I personally know and love. So it's kind of like, but then you get these stories like in this last issue. Shopping with Ida is probably one of my favorite stories of all time, and I actually cannot remember the name of the author. Peter Carter, I think. But that story, every single time I read it, I weep, like literally weep. So that kind of makes up for all the weeping because I can't take something. I'm looking up this issue right now because I'm like, Peter J. Carter, I want to say. But see, now that issue is published, I'm like, I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I have the same trouble with people ask me about books and characters and things, and I have to
Yeah,
think about it. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, I wrote that like 10 years ago. How am I supposed to remember?
it's published, right? I'm on a different thing now. I'm working on the next issue. But yes, it
Yeah,
is.
I
It's
mean, yeah, I
shopping
mean,
with
I
Ida.
finished 4 drafts in November. I mean, I got stuff rattling around in my head and bumping up
Yeah,
against one another.
yeah. There's a crowd up here, guys. We
Yeah.
can't keep track of everybody in the crowd. But it is Peter J. Carter, so I'm actually like, oh, I remembered. Peter J. Carter was shopping with Ida. Beautiful story.
Okay, so what issue was that in so everybody can go out and buy it?
That is number 145. That's the one we just came out with. And I was going to make a prediction. I think this is going to be one of those stories that winds up winning awards. And, like it kind of a lot reminds me of the Shirley Jackson one with the Stones. I don't know why I can't think of the name of that story, but, in
The
the,
lottery?
yeah, the lottery. I was like, do I give a spoiler? Everybody's probably read that now. The one I don't want to tell
Yeah,
you what happened.
everybody knows about the
Stones.
I mean, every horror fan knows what the lottery story is. Yeah.
But we always have to be so careful with spoilers. I was like, wait, what if somebody hasn't read it? But yeah, so that's kind of that feeling in the lottery. It's not like a classic, shocking story, but it just resonates with you forever. Like you'll never forget it. And that's kind of what his story reminds me of. It's just going to be here with us forever. And that's a beautiful, happy thing.
Okay. So with the Space and Time magazine, you also did an AI issue.
We did.
And I was wondering why you decided to do that, especially with all the controversy around AI these days.
Okay, so this interview has been very tense. No, no, it honestly was. I'm not for AI and I'm not against AI, but I'm definitely for learning, like exploring things. So when AI was the big deal, like I mean, I think it's kind of simmered down now, but at the time it was like you are either it was of Satan or it was of God. You know, it was like two
Mm,
polarizing. And I was kind of like, well, nothing is either all good or all bad. So let's explore it. And it was actually Leonard Spicer, who is one of our columnists in the magazine, suggested it. And I was kind of like, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's explore. Because everybody's saying you have two teams. One is saying you can't get anything good out of AI. And one team is saying like AI will save the world, basically. Those are the two extremes. And so the AI exploration issue, which we have did take a lot of heat for, but in the end it was really good, was basically to say what can be produced with AI. It wasn't, and all of the artists got paid because we weren't using our human artists for that issue. We were keeping it all with AI to see what the capabilities are. But we still paid every single artist, whether they would have been in the magazine or not, just to make sure we weren't replacing humans. Or, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a
mm,
cost saving thing. And we just wanted to see what would happen. And it was, in the end, it was very good. The thing that we discovered from the AI discovery issue is that none of the stories that were pure AI could make it through the submissions because it was an ordinary submissions. We had readers. If you didn't like the story, it doesn't move on, you know. But the ways that people did use AI, I thought were really amazing. One author had AI as a character, and so the AI in the story was writing its own. I think it was writing a book, and so it was writing a little book for this kindergarten class, but it was actually just the AI doing it with the prompt. We had another author who completely wrote his story from, you know, the traditional way of using your brain, but he wrote it in Spanish and he used AI to translate it. You know, these are the things that I wanted to say. Well, that is good for AI because not everybody can afford a translator. That's making human art more available. And then there was a lot of bombs like that just never made it through. You know, um, I honestly can't think of, oh my goodness, the dogs who are always quiet. I apologize. Everybody listening, that is my dog Chupacabra. I'm sure you loved listening to him. But yeah, so that's basically the AI issue. It was, we did take a lot of heat for it, as some people may remember on Twitter mostly. And, but it was okay. I stand by it. I'm happy that I did it. I don't really have regrets. It was surprising to see the way people reacted. We had a lot of private messages of support, like, thanks for just exploring this, because everybody at the time was, none of us knew. I mean, I don't think we still know really if it's friend or foe, but we're certainly not going to find out by completely pretending it's not there. And
yeah.
that's the whole point of the AI issue.
Yeah, it's not going away
Yeah.
anytime at all, I don't think. But I
Yeah.
mean, there are companies and places that are actually using AI responsibly
Hmm.
and in interesting ways. I mean, especially like I have been exploring the AI art side
Hmm.
as opposed because I mean, I don't really have a use for the AI writing side. I mean, I know some people do like with the blurbs and the and outlines and stuff, but I mean, I don't really need it for that because
Hmm.
I do that stuff myself anyway, and I'm fine with
Well,
it.
yeah. And why are we writers? Because we
Yeah,
want to write. Like, why would we have AI do it for us?
yeah. And I really think of some of my story ideas might break the AI. So y-
Yeah, that is the other thing with AI is you can't really be very flexible with it. I don't know how many times I've gotten warnings for just questions. I'm just asking you, how does a head explode? I mean, what
yeah,
is wrong with that?
yeah. It's the same thing on the AI art side. They won't allow certain phrases and stuff, and
Hmm.
sometimes the AI comes up with I'm pretty sure, bad interpretations of an innocent phrase.
Yes.
I've had that happen a few times. But the one of the companies that is doing a very responsible thing on the AI art side is Adobe,
Mm-hmm.
who's actually integrated it into its own stock photo uh,
Yeah.
site, and is its generated fill is using the stock photos they have on their site. They're paying the artists from the usage and stuff. So that's I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a responsible way that it should head, whether it will head that way or not. But
Yeah, I think it will. By us being engaged, like there's a Hugging Face, which that's an article that uh wow, I think the dog barking has like erased all my words. It's an article up on our site right now for spaceandtime.net, but it's Lee Hennig wrote a piece on Hugging Face, which is responsible ethical AI. And
mm,
it's open source. And I think us being engaged and paying attention to this can turn it to that. We decide as consumers. We're not going to decide this by, pretending, as we said,
yeah,
that it doesn't exist. But who is being involved with it is Microsoft's lawyers. There was an AI symposium thing at the very beginning of the year, and those lawyers were there. We were all boycotting it because we don't want to sully ourselves with AI, but the lawyers were there.
yeah.
So
Well, I'm not surprised the Microsoft lawyers were there, considering the Bing AI went off the rails a lot. I'm not exactly sure what
yeah,
happened there, but some things happened.
yes, yeah, I've heard a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised the Microsoft lawyers were there. They probably need to protect themselves.
Yeah, they were. I think they were because this was like way before Bing even happened,
Yeah.
so they were preemptively probably preparing.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean that's the thing though. I mean, they have people we still don't know have any clue as to how to use it properly, I think, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Yeah, and when the Gutenberg press came out, I was reading this. Same thing, same situations. I think it's
Mm,
almost any time there's new technology comes out. At the time, all the people that were handwriting books said this is the end of books,
yeah.
and publishing. We just can't do it anymore. Not with this horrific machine that's taking the soul out of books.
But it didn't. So
I know without how we can all be literate. Oh,
yeah.
shucks.
Okay, so from AIs we're going into poetry, which is might be some of the more visceral forms of art that you can have, and specifically horror poetry. I know I've gotten some odd reactions when I tell people that I write horror poetry. So how has your poetry or horror poetry been received?
It kind of depends on the people that I'm talking to. Like for the masses, like the most of everybody that I know, it's very like, "Oh, did you say horror?" And I think that they think you're writing poems about, a man with a chainsaw enters my room and now I know I will die soon. That's not what we mean. It is just reaching into the dark recesses of our experience, and all sorts of things can be horror or dark poetry,
Mm,
as you know, as a
yeah.
writer of this yourself. So in general, I think a lot of people are a little bit horrified. I think that's why a lot of us have started using the word dark poetry instead of horror poetry. But I almost feel like that's like a little bit of a cop out, because what poetry, well, there is not dark poetry, but most poetry from my experience is dark. We do tend to explore the horrors of war or the horrors of our lives, through poetry. And I think it's because we can tell the truth without exposing ourselves. But in general, it's not well received by most people.
Mm,
But then you go to some group like the HWA or Shadows and Ink, and you know a whole nother
yeah.
story. We
Yeah.
understand each other.
Yeah, you have to find your people. That's
Yeah.
basically it. Yeah.
Yep. And who
Because yeah,
cares about the rest of them?
yeah. And to be fair, I have written a few poems about serial killers. Just for
I
clarification.
I am a very big fan of. I want to put this delicately and just right so it doesn't sound incriminating, but you have very good slaughter, Anita. I appreciate your slaughter. We'll just say that. Not
Okay.
real slaughter.
No, no, it's all fictional, people.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're just
As
writers.
as my website says, I am not a serial killer. I
Yeah,
just do it in the fiction.
we spill ink, not blood. Don't worry
Yes.
about it.
Okay. And so, as part of the poetry, you've recently had you've been teaching a course, and now you have a book from Crystal Lake, Whispers from Beyond. So tell us about that. How did all that come about?
Oh, that is one of my favorite ways to do poetry is when you can collaborate with other people because you start springboarding off of each other and more ideas than what you would think of and other perspectives come into play. And that's basically what the whole class with Crystal Lake Publishing, I think, was. Well, Crystal Lake Entertainment now. Sorry, because I know that Joe has expanded. It was a bunch of very talented poets. I don't think there was anybody in there that I would say, well, I don't know if these words would ever cross my lips anyways. I'm a little biased towards poetry, but everybody was very, very competent and very skilled in that class anyways. And so we were basically leading a group. It was me and Colleen Anderson and Maxwell Gold and Jamal Hodge. And the four of us were leading this group. And I feel like it was less of a class and more just a collaborative experiment for us to all try different things. But then at the end of it, there was so much good poetry. Crystal Lake Entertainment decided to publish it in an anthology, which is Whispers from Beyond. And that is a fantastic book. I mean, it's just exploration and growth and inspiration all wrapped up. There was some poems in there from people that actually they were like, I'm not really a dark poet, I don't really do dark poetry, and they would come up with like the best stuff. I want to say Michael Payne was one of those that actually wrote a poem about how he didn't write horror poetry, and it's a hilarious and very well done poem that I love. I'll never forget it. So that was a great project and a lot of fun to work on.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about your new project, which is okay. I'm not going to pronounce this word right, so I apologize in advance. Inugeny?
Hey, very close. Inu
Okay,
Genie. And if
Inugeny.
you
Okay,
Inu is dog, so if you think of Inuyasha, Inugenie, and it just means a dog's death or like a futile death, like a death that didn't matter, and that is basically in Okinawa what they call World War II. It was an Inugenie, loyal people dying for no reason at all. So that's kind of what the book is about. It follows three girls um, through. It's not really a coming of age story, but they do all happen to come of age, and it's their journey on Okinawa as at the start of the Battle of Okinawa, and how they navigate to find their own strength.
all right, so how did the book come about? What inspired you to write it?
That actually was directly from Tortured Willows. After I'd finished writing Tortured Willows, I had so much. I will even say like rage and anger and upset over all the things that I read and found out about. And I basically went from somebody who was like, and I'm a third generation Okinawan, so or Shimanshu or Ryukyu. There's like probably part of the problem is there's like five names for that indigenous people. Um, but I had so much like anger and upset. I went from like I'm a weirdo. There's nobody really like me that I can find to, oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch of these weirdos. They're called Ryukin people. And like, wow, there's so many traits that we're sharing. And I get this, I understand it. It's the first time I ever had like a thought of like, oh yeah, my people. It was very weird. But then I found out all these things that happened. And yeah, just anger and anger. And I didn't know how to channel it. And it was probably the worst month of my life because we had COVID, and I had just finished In Eugenie. I'm sorry, Tortured Willows. So I was still torn up about that and just trying to process it. And as you probably do as well, you process pain through writing, and that's how you channel it and kind of get it out of your own head. And yeah, COVID, we had a suicide, a family suicide, and we didn't know about it, but another death at that month that we hadn't even known about, and our family dog passed away. And so writing that story was like keeping me sane. Um, and it was just therapy, basically, just absolute therapy. And yeah. And then I didn't touch it again for 2 years because, like, I just couldn't go back to it or something. And I also assumed it would just be absolute junk because I was fevered half the time. You know what I mean? So I read it through this year and I was like, okay, I think it's time. It's time to get this edited and put it out.
Yeah, well, I think most authors think their stuff is junk anyway as they're writing it. And it's only when they go back to editing, oh, this isn't quite as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, this is all right. Well, and
And then they finish it and think it's junk again. So,
I have heard I have heard it said that if you think your work is beautiful and perfect from the first draft, it's junk. If you think it's junk, it's probably pretty good. So it's always the opposite of what you think.
mm, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Authors go from it's junk. Oh, it's okay. It's wonderful. Oh no, this is junk.
Everybody hates me for this.
Yeah,
What was I thinking?
yeah, exactly. It's like it's always up and down on.
It is. And I have been so nervous about this book because, like I said, I wrote it
Hmm,
with COVID and everything. I liked it, but that means it's probably junk. This is what I'm thinking. But it's gotten good feedback already. I've got 2 reviews up, and I just got the forward back, the introduction from Alma Katsu. And I was also very nervous because Alma's Japanese. And the book basically says, look at what these Japanese people did and these Americans, but it's not pinpointing a race, it's the military, the governments. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I really hope that message comes through, that it's not the people, that it's, what the people are forced to do, or led to believe that is right,
yeah.
so I was really nervous about that because I didn't want to, of course, offend anybody. You know what I mean?
Mm,
But we do have to tell our stories, and Alma's introduction is fantastic, as is she, and not like Angela. Look at all the things you said about Japanese. I just meant soldiers and government, imperialism, colonialism. so, so it's made me feel better. But of course, I'm still edgy about it. Like,
yeah.
oh, everybody's gonna hate it.
Yeah, I was like that too when I published my poetry book, Roses and Ashes, which
Yeah,
is a very feministic book of poetry, very women's issue oriented. And it's like I debated for like about 6 months whether to even publish that or not before I did. I just said, oh,
yeah.
I just said, screw it, I'm doing it. Mm,
I'm glad you did, because without, I mean, what is the point of art? It's risk, right?
mm,
Like, if we're all publishing nice, safe things, what is the point of
yeah.
creating anymore?
Yeah, it's easier to publish the nice safe things that are horror though than the nice safe things that are controversial, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, so I think we'll wrap the interview up here then. And I'd like to thank you for being a guest. It was always a pleasure to chat with you.
Always a pleasure to chat with you. I apologize for all the dog noises that was reserved just for this half an hour.
Okay, and thank you all for listening to this episode of Shadows and Ink. Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks.